testify, he would get that position.
Okay. And then what happened? What did Senator Grassley and his committee get before David Graham actually testified?
Well, phone calls that were supposedly anonymous came into Senator Grassley's office questioning the integrity of Dr. Graham.
And where did those phone calls come from?
Little did the people calling know, but Senator Grassley had a caller ID system in place, and he looked at the phone numbers, and they were coming from management at FDA.
Anonymous calls coming from management at FDA saying that this guy is not somebody to be believed. Now, I would think if they really didn't think that, they could go talk to Grassley heads up, wouldn't you think? Now, well, Dr. Simone, you've heard these kind of stories without a doubt. Now, as a doctor, I think you have another website called, is it Stop FDA Censorship? Is that right?
Yes.
What is that, and does it have any connection to what we're talking about here?
Well, exactly, yeah. It talks about this whole issue of censoring our language about what we can say about nutraceuticals and how nutraceuticals can actually take the place and even prevent and treat some diseases. So the truth is nutraceuticals can prevent and treat diseases. The truth is only 7% of all cancers and heart disease cases are linked to genetics, and we can improve the quality and extent of life for most Americans with nutraceuticals as well. The problem we have is that we spend the most on health care in the world. It'll reach $4.3 trillion in the year 2017. And despite that, despite spending the most in the world, we are now ranked number 19 out of 19 industrialized nations. So when we look to the measure of what we spend and what we get for what we spend, we're down at the bottom. 1 in 2 men, 1 in 3 women in America will be diagnosed with cancer, and 2 in 5 Americans will develop these cardiovascular diseases. And the point is this: since 1920, since all these drugs, all the radiation, all the research, etc., since all these drugs have come out, no one has lived any longer as an adult with cancer than the people who did in 1920. That means...
Let me stop you there for a second, because we all live a whole lot longer. I mean, I take drugs of some type from time to time, as do almost everybody in this country, and it looks to me as if these drugs must be what are keeping us alive longer, because we got more drugs and we're living longer. I realize that's a correlation, not a causation, but what's wrong with that argument?
Well, the issue is cancer. That's what I was talking about. The illumination of this problem with losing the war on cancer is this challenge. That despite all these things that we're doing for cancer, for instance, there's been no change in lifespan. So a person who gets a cancer today, prostate cancer or breast cancer, will live no longer than a woman or a man who got it in 1920. Now, all we're doing now is finding the cancers much earlier than what we did, say, even 10 or 12 years ago with better technology. Our technology is still not great, but it is finding the cancer sooner. So we're improving the quality of life for many of these people, but we are not changing the outcome with regard to lifespan. And that's the key thing. Can you give a drug to a patient and change the lifespan of the patient? That's all we really care about in cancer care, right? We want to know if what we're doing is going to make the patient live longer.
Okay.
And the case is not the case.
All right. I've got a comment or a question here from the audience.
About what percentage of the total medical expenditure of this country is spent on pharmaceuticals?
Well, I don't know the exact number, but we're reaching $4.3 trillion, and a great majority of that is in the pharmaceutical area, but I don't know the exact number.
Jonathan, you know the percentage?
Well, it's roughly 10% of the GDP.
Well, 10% of the GDP would be about $1.4 trillion, which will be about 1/3. That seems like about the right number. That 1/3 of healthcare is spent on some sort of pharmaceutical drugs, which is a huge number. Now, Jonathan, there's a fairly new government program pushed forward by the Bush administration in 2003, and it's going to do great things for those of us who are old, because we can't afford our prescription drugs. And so we're going to have this prescription drug plan allegedly pushed through because the Bush administration didn't want it to be a campaign issue in 2004. I don't know if that's the case. This Medicare Part D, tell us how it was passed, first of all, and what it's supposed to do.
Well, unfortunately, Medicare Part D, as David Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, has testified before Congress, could well bankrupt the United States if these other horrific economic circumstances don't beforehand. But at the time he testified, which is about a year ago, he testified that it would bankrupt the United States by 2014. And the reason is a provision that was in the bill that prohibits the government from acquiring or negotiating a reduction in the price of drugs that are covered by Medicare Part D for seniors based on volume acquired. And as a result of that, essentially the drug industry can determine how much money comes from the United States Treasury to the drug industry simply based on what they wish to charge the government as a unit price for the drugs.
Who wrote that bill?
That bill was written by the Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Research Association and other drug companies. It's over 1,000 pages long, and it was introduced the same day that it was to be passed. In other words, an over 1,000-page bill was given to members of Congress, and they had less than a day to read that entire bill and form an opinion before the leadership brought it to a vote. And the Bush administration pushed very hard for this and for the provision that prevented a negotiated lowering of the price of drugs.
All right, Jonathan, I've seen these things happen before, is that they put a big bill in there, not a pharmaceutical bill, but other kinds of bills, and they know that the representatives and the senators are not going to read these bills at all. Isn't that true?
Sure.
So consequently, I can only say that somehow this thing got passed because somebody wanted to get passed, and you say it was who?
Billy Tauzin.
Billy Tauzin.
And the president.
Who is Billy Tauzin?
Billy Tauzin was the head of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was the point man for the Bush administration on the bill.
From Louisiana.
Louisiana.
So this bill hits the floor the same day that the 1,000 pages show up, and we want to get a vote on it the same day, yes?
Yes.
So tell me what the procedure was that day.
Well, they didn't have enough votes, so they waited until the wee hours of the morning when C-SPAN isn't covering it, 2 a.m., and they kept the voting machines open, the voting system open, beyond the 15 minutes, which is the typical time period within which they have people vote, for 2 more hours, actually over 2 hours, in order to continue to pressure and strong-arm members until they shifted their position and voted for the bill, and that squeaked by with a majority.